Who, sir, is the greatest living painter in the world?
Today, Dali.
Mon génie à moi est de plus en plus près de ceux des anges.
Vous aimez l'argent?
Le plus que tout.
Plus que tout.
À part le gala. Plus gala, mais tout de suite après l'argent.
Vous aimez étonner, maître. Est-ce que vous aimez être aimé?
Non, je tiens à être aimé uniquement d'une seule personne, ma femme. C'est-à-dire que la plupart des choses que je fais, je les fais pour étonner ma femme avant n'importe qui.
Behind nearly every work of Salvador Dali lies an extraordinary woman, a muse, a wife, an obsession, the central figure in his universe. Dali, one of the most famous Spanish painters in the world, the master of surrealism, achieved success, fame, and wealth. Yet throughout his life, he remained mesmerized by his muse, like a young man captivated by his first love. But what do we really know about Gala? She inspired heart-wrenching poems from Paul Éluard, dreamlike paintings from Max Ernst, and enigmatic photographs from Man Ray. She was much more than a muse. She was hypnotic. Who was she to enchant so many men? With her exuberant sensuality, fiery temperament, and avant-garde audacity, she fascinated all who encountered her. What role did she play in building the myth of Salvador Dali? How did she influence the Prince of Extravagance? Today, Gala is often seen as a woman in the shadows, but she never intended to stay there. The meeting between Gala and Salvador Dali took place in 1929, a moment that would change the course of art history. That year, Dali invited a group of friends from his circle of surrealist painters and poets to vacation at his estate in Spain. Everyone stayed at his home, some accompanied by their partners. As Salvador greeted each guest and toured the property, he opened the door to one of the rooms and found Gala completely naked. He was instantly captivated, as he would later recount.
La première vraie rencontre, j'ai ouvert la porte de ma maison de mes parents et Gala était déjà nu derrière la porte.
Overcome with emotion and desperate to make an impression, he tore off his clothes, hung a ring on his ear, and covered himself with a mixture of goat excrement and fish oil. He claimed that this excited him greatly and thought it might seduce this stranger.
Le tout puait d'une façon invraisemblable et j'ai commencé la séduction qui a très bien marché. En fait. Une semaine, il était amoureuse de moi.
The connection between them was immediate and intense. By the end of the week, all the other guests returned to France, but Gala stayed behind with the painter. She would remain by his side for 50 years. This marked the beginning of a passion that would inspire Dali's entire body of work, as we will see. Gala saw in Dali a blossoming genius and decided to leave everything behind to stay with him. But Gala hadn't come to Spain alone for this vacation. She was there with her husband and daughter. Her husband was none other than the renowned poet Paul Éluard, who was already a celebrated figure. Yet she abandoned him for this young Spanish painter, who was 10 years her junior. Gala was born in Russia 35 years earlier as Elena Diakonova into a wealthy bourgeois family. She was a brilliant student with a passion for literature and the arts. She spoke several languages and had a strong curiosity about the world around her. However, she suffered from tuberculosis, and in 1912, her parents sent her to a sanatorium in Switzerland to recover. She found the experience dull and spent her days reading and strolling in the park until she noticed a young poet absorbed in his books and his dreams. It was love at first sight. He would later take the name Paul Éluard. He was 17, like her. He was ill, like her, and deeply in love with literature and poetry, like her. Paul was captivated. He read his poems to her, and she encouraged and supported his nascent talent. Their love was forbidden by the sanatorium's strict rules, but it burned intensely. During the Mardi Gras costume ball, they dressed as Pierrot, radiating youthful innocence and joy. Unfortunately, when their treatment ended, they had to return to their respective countries. They wrote letters professing their love. Paul was sent to the front lines of World War I, and Gala crossed Europe during the war to reunite with him. They married in 1917, and a year later, their daughter Cécile was born. However, Gala would neglect her daughter for most of her life, leaving her to form a closer bond with her father. After the war, the young couple settled in Paris and immersed themselves in the avant-garde art scene, befriending figures like André Breton, Philippe Soupeau, and Louis Aragon. Gala embraced her youth with fervor, partying, posing for photographer friends, and taking on multiple lovers, with Paul Éluard's approval. One day, after discovering the paintings of German artist Max Ernst, they decided to travel to Cologne to meet him. Éluard wrote in his personal journals, "Immediate friendship." According to Éluard scholar Jean-Charles Gatteau, this encounter was a three-way love at first sight. Ernst was enthralled by Gala, Éluard by Ernst, and Gala couldn't resist the charms of this visionary painter. Paul showed nude photos of Gala to Ernst, who was captivated by this nymph-like figure. A triangular relationship developed, and Max Ernst moved in with them, creating a ménage à trois. Gala stimulated their creative energies. Ernst painted on the apartment walls, while the household became a hub of artistic excitement. Gala posed for Ernst's paintings and inspired Éluard's poetry. Inevitably, tensions grew, leading to frequent arguments. The situation became unbearable for Éluard, who left on a trip to escape and find solitude. Upon his return, he published the poignant collection, Au défaut du silence, featuring 20 drawings of Gala by Max Ernst. Eventually, the couple distanced themselves from Max Ernst, removing him from their intimate lives. It was during this period that Paul Éluard met Salvador Dali in Paris, who invited them, along with a few friends, to his home in Spain. It was there that Dali experienced his hypnotic first encounter with Gala when he opened a door. One afternoon, during a walk near Dali's estate by the ocean, he knelt before her and confessed his love. Gala took his hand and uttered these prophetic words, "My little one, we will never leave each other." Yet, behind his flamboyant facade, Dali wrestled with deep panic. He had never been in a relationship with a woman and held significant doubts about his masculinity. Meeting Gala freed him from this fear. He painted Inaugural Gooseflesh, which expresses his state of tension and turmoil during their first intimate encounter. Dali had been tormented by these issues since childhood, and it was Gala who liberated him. She introduced him to love and helped him move beyond solitary pleasures. The physical aspect of their relationship was pivotal. To Dali, sexuality was not merely physical desire. It was also a realm of artistic expression, exploring the boundaries of his subconscious. It served as both transgression and catharsis. Shortly after meeting Gala, Dali painted The Great Masturbator in 1929, a work that marked a turning point in his artistic evolution with a very erotic painting. It revealed his fantasies and personal struggles. A year later, he created The Spectre of Sex Appeal, in which he depicted himself as a child confronting his sexual frustrations, symbolized by the specter of libido. For Dali, meeting Gala was a defining moment that unleashed his creative flow. From that point on, Gala became his muse and his primary source of inspiration. Not only did Dali paint Gala, but he also wrote about her with his characteristic exuberance. Her body had a childlike complexion, her shoulder blades and lumbar muscles that slightly abrupt tension of adolescence. Yet the curve of her lower back was extremely feminine, elegantly connecting her energetic and proud torso to her very slender hips, which her wasp-like waist made even more desirable. Dali was particularly fascinated by her back, making it the subject of his painting, My Wife Nude, Contemplating Her Own Body, which clearly references Man Ray's iconic Ingres's Violin, itself inspired by Ingres's The Valpinsen Bather. In 1976, Dali painted the luminous Gala contemplating the Mediterranean Sea, which at 20 meters becomes the portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This work once again reflected his adoration for his wife, while unexpectedly associating her with an American president. To Dali, Gala was the epitome of the ideal feminine figure, an omnipresent, enigmatic, and mysterious force in his work. Her sensuality intertwined with Dali's mystical pursuits, heavily inspired by the Renaissance. Dali depicted Gala in various forms, sometimes as a goddess, other times as an almost surreal figure, as in Portrait of Gala, 1935. During the final months of World War II, Dali painted Gallerina, a tribute to Raphael's La Fornarina. Unlike his other works, this painting was radically different, requiring extensive research and showcasing precise Renaissance techniques. It was also a declaration of love to Gala. because Gala is to me what La Fornerina was to Raphael. In The Madonna of Port Lagat, Dali gave Gala's features to the Virgin Mary holding the infant Jesus. Similarly, in The Sacrament of the Last Supper, 1955, Gala's face overlaps with Christ's, symbolizing the tension between the sacred and the profane. However, Gala was not merely a pious or idealized figure. Dali infused her into his distorted worlds, blending sexuality with sublimation. She was ever present in Dali's work, shaping every stage of his artistic journey. "Without Gala, I am nothing. She is my oxygen," the Catalan painter often declared. "She discovers and brings me all the essences that I transform into honey within the hive of my mind." One of Dali's most famous works, Leda Atomica, depicts Gala as Leda, the mother of Helen of Troy. Its floating elements and distorted perspectives exemplify Dali's surrealism. Gala was thrilled to see her image immortalized in this major work by the master. Gala liberated Dali from his inhibitions, stimulated his creativity, and nourished his art. Dali even created a personal alphabet for her, which was incorporated into a handbag designed by Noxe called the Daligram. Dali's work transcended art to influence fashion as well. Yet, Gala was not just a muse. She was Dali's greatest partner in every sense of the word. She was determined to make him an icon of modern art, taking charge of his career management. She made most of the decisions for him, even signing contracts on his behalf. Gala took great pride in this. "In the morning, Salvador makes mistakes, and in the afternoon, I correct them by tearing up the contracts he signed frivolously," she said. Together, the Dali couple became a commercial powerhouse, monetizing everything they touched, driven by their colossal financial needs. André Breton even nicknamed Dali Avida Dollars, an anagram of Salvador Dali, which symbolized his fame, media presence, and the multitude of commissions he attracted worldwide. Dali and Gala lived both together and apart in France, Spain, and the United States, in a shack and in a castle, as a couple and as a trio. All their life was anything but ordinary. When they met in 1929, their relationship caused a dramatic break in Dali's life. His father disapproved of Gala, who was already married, as well as his son's bohemian lifestyle and the shocking works that were beginning to bring him fame. He rejected Dali and expelled him from the family home, cutting off his financial support. In protest, Dali shaved his head. At this time, Dali painted an autobiographical piece, William Tell. In it, his father is depicted as a castrating guardian of Dali's desires. But Gala and Dali only wanted each other. With the proceeds from his first painting sales to a benefactor, Dali bought a modest fisherman's hut by the water in Port Lagat, Spain. It was just meters away from the family estate, where they were no longer welcome. The village ostracized them, but Gala and Dali lived off their love and fishing. Gala inspired Dali and encouraged him to experiment with new techniques. Dali painted, while Gala managed both him and their modest home. Over the years, they expanded the hut, building their dream home piece by piece. The house embodied Dali's eccentricity. For example, he built a pool 12 meters long, but only 2 meters wide and 1.5 meters deep, lining the bottom with sea urchins to prevent bathers from standing. Most famously, the pool's rounded ends gave it a phallic shape, complete with water jets for added effect. This house museum remained Dali's residence until Gala's death. The Spanish Civil War and World War II forced them into an 8-year exile in the United States. They settled in New York, where Dali's fame grew exponentially. They threw extraordinary parties. Shortly after arriving in New York, they organized a dream ball, inviting guests to come dressed as they appeared in their most recurring dreams. Their most legendary soiree took place in California during World War II, a surrealist ball with the theme of bad dreams. Hollywood stars like Alfred Hitchcock and Ginger Rogers attended. Guests were served trays of live frogs that leapt away whenever they could, wandered through the house encountering an overturned car wreck with a nude woman inside, and mingled with wild animals Dali had brought in from the San Francisco Zoo. In the middle of the event, Gala presided over the party from a giant bed, holding a lion cub on a leash. These events were part of Dali's larger surrealist oeuvre. After returning to Europe, they spent summers in Spain and winters between Paris and New York. They frequently hosted extravagant gala dinners, lavish feasts that Dali later documented in a cookbook published in 1973. Amid this frenzy, Gala led a life of luxury and frivolity, taking numerous lovers. Though jealous, Dali allowed it. Andy Warhol, a friend of the couple, recounted seeing Gala arrive at a party with a young actor who had played Jesus Christ in a musical. Dali stood and shouted, "Gala, I Jesu Christus superstar!" The crowd erupted in applause. Dali doesn't hold back the fact that he's cuckolded. Instead, he exaggerated it to turn the situation into art and humor. One evening at the famous Castel Club in Paris, Dali noticed an 18-year-old model and approached her saying, "You have the most beautiful death skull I've ever seen." What an idiot, she thought, but she soon fell for his charm. Her name was Amanda Lear, and Dali wanted her by his side. Preparing her to meet Gala, he advised, "She's not an easy woman. You need to make a good impression. Wear violet eyeshadow, style your hair in a banana chignon, and put on a miniskirt." He presented Amanda to Gala, twirling her around to show her beauty. Gala's response was clear. We should see her in the sunlight. She was charmed, but warned Amanda, "If anything goes wrong, it will be your fault." Amanda moved in with the couple at Port Legat, where they lived together for years. Dali painted while Amanda read to him, but Gala often left, wary of her role as Dali's muse and manager. She tasked Amanda with taking over her role when she'd be gone. Gala even made Amanda swear on the Black Virgin of Kazan to marry Dali after her death. But Amanda, young and beginning her singing career, drifted away. Gala, unimpressed by Amanda's success, remarked, "You know, I listened to your record. You sing like a drunk driver. Nobody understands a word." In the late 1960s, Dali gifted Gala a grand medieval castle near Port Legat, the Castle of Pubol. It became her sanctuary, where she focused on renovations and decoration, permitting Dali to visit only with her written invitation. Gala was buried there in 1982. Dali spent his final years in the castle, alone and mourning the loss of his muse. Dali's fear of death had haunted him since childhood, stemming from his parents' obsession with his deceased older brother, who had died 3 years before Dali's birth and shared his name, Salvador.
J'étais obligé, justement, à jouer au génie dans le sens d'affirmer toutes les minutes que moi, je n'étais pas de l'autre, que moi, je n'étais pas mort. Et alors, j'étais forcé de commettre et de perpétrer tous ces genres d'excentricité. C'est le côté loufoque que les gens croient voir dans Dali, et que justement, c'est le côté le plus tragique de mon existence. Puisque toutes les semaines, j'ai dû affirmer pour m'en convaincre moi-même que je n'étais pas l'autre, que moi, j'étais le frère vivant.
Eccentric, provocative, and a mad genius, Dali was every one of these things. Gala was a central thread in his work, along with his deceased brother. They are the two guiding threads of his life, and even of life itself, as Dali would assert himself.
Les deux grands moteurs de l'inspiration artistique de l'homme, un, la libido, et l'autre, l'angoisse de la mort.